Samanyam the logo.
Marmor.
Not the logo.
Jungle. Tamaki.
So today, Madame and friends, we talk about the union of the relative and the ultimate Bodhichitta, and a method to actualize that, the deity yoga, practicing a deity. So I will introduce you to that. Although I do not have much learning and do not know so much, I will share what I do know with you. And so first of all, we need to understand where the deity that we are practicing actually comes from. Who actually is that deity? And that is also very clearly explained in the Samantabhadra prayer. It explains where the deity actually comes from. The deity arises from the Dharmakaya. And the Dharmakaya is space-like by nature. And it is referred to as Samantabhadra, or in the new tantric system as Vajradhara. It is just like one person having three names. So first we need to understand where the deity actually came from, and there's a section in the Samantabhadra prayer that explains that, so I will read that. So that's it starts on page 15 anyways. I myself, Samantabhadra, innately know from its basis suchness the basic fact void of cause or condition. It is not flawed by outward inflation or inward detraction, nor covered by the dark veil of unconsciousness. Hence, self-appearances have not been tainted by faults. When reflexive Rigpa abides in place, even if the three planes came to ruin, there would be no panic or attachment to the five desirables. In self-arisen, thought-free consciousness, neither substantial forms nor the five poisons exist. Rigpa's unencumbered clarity aspect has one essence with five wisdoms. From their maturation, the primal Buddha's five families emerged. As the wisdom further expanded, the 42 Buddhas arose. As the 5 wisdoms' dynamism dawned, the 60 blood drinkers emerged. Hence, basic Rigpa never became confused. Yeah, this is one.
다디 시력들 나오냐면 봐서 나오냐 다진 이디서 되는 거 고바 저거래. 그 이제 적지 봐도 이제 방 무슨 소나. 오, 다디 적바도 못 봐래. 변을 초장마 공부 봐오나. 땡 속은 타마는 통 주제. 들랍감 초장마 민소 먹게 너무 자다 봐. 그랬지 그래서. 최저 마송했더니 출처상 되니 출강탁들 사부라서 송도 쳐들이 다른 통나요 말이지. 옛날에 쳐대 서울은 말송 쳐대 초코랑 같이 듣다는 좋고요 말이 제일라서 거기 신독제도 쳐대도 맞어로 제가 저로 어떻게 고소해. 오 양자 쳐대 사르나나 송 사르나 이게 들이 더치 차차한테 짱 맞지. 저도 양절 짱 맞는 거고요. 그래서 오늘은 나빠라랑 봐라. 들이 나빠라 좀 받아 잘 봐라서 봐. 그래서 대다 상지 이제 대신이 뭐지? 초장마다 주봐야 돼. 강 초다자는 거야 매봐. 대회들이 대신이 뭐 그런 걸 하시더라. 등은 내되나? 들이 저좀 직장 하자면 용을 잡아면 손가락 뒤. 그 대신이 뭐라는 거도 대답을 해. 대회나들이 대신이 뭐 대래 들사들이 정로래. 속절 다다 대래. 다들 대신 잡도 약만만 하나씩 그렇게 잡야요래. 들이 생 내로 대신이 뭐더라. 그선 이신나 요래. 다 대래들이 제는 강아 차송을. 들이 거기서 사탐지 담고 대처요래. 대하고도 오 요래 지금 스타라 무슨 독서란 게 지금 당그 생고 녹다. 달라양도 라고 생각하면 너 달라양도 내가 이거 라이오 땅이 대통 먹고요.
And so yesterday already we talked about introduced to the ultimate truth, and we have explained mindfulness. And so just now in this prayer, it is this mindfulness, this Rigpa, the awareness, the primordial wisdom that has never become confused, has never been confused. And from this awareness, the pure lands of the Dharmakaya and the Sambhogakayas are created. And according to this prayer, if you recognize it, you are a Buddha. So recognizing it, from this nature then, the various countless Sambhogakaya deities who are wisdom beings, wisdom deities, appear in the countless pure lands in various forms, peaceful and wrathful and so forth. And if you do not recognize it, if you are unaware of it, then you are a sentient being wandering in samsara. So then this awareness, this clear awareness then becomes a self. It grasps, it perceives a self, and then perceives a duality of self and others, and therefore creates samsara. But whenever you recognize the basis of awareness, it always has been the same that way. It always has the same nature. It has never changed. And that basic nature is like pure water. When the water just comes straight from the ground, like from a spring, then it is very pure, and you can drink the mountain stream, and you can wash yourself, and even can use it as putting it into your eyes as eye drops and so on. And then as the water flows down into the villages, and it comes into the various the bathrooms and toilets and so on, and then you can't actually drink it anymore. But still, it's still the same water actually. The water hasn't changed. The nature of the water that came out of the earth is still the same, essentially. And actually, I've heard nowadays scientists are even able to reverse this by recycling the water. They can reuse that defiled water and put it back into the earth and purify it with various substances, and again it emerges clean from the earth. So that's also possible, but it still remains the same water. And then again it appears, the same water evaporates and appears as the clouds and then as the rain and so forth. And so the basic nature of the mind, Buddha nature, is just like that, like this completely pure water. And that will never be spoiled, the essence of that water. And according to the Samantabhadra prayer, when you rest within the natural state of mind, within Buddha nature, then the prayer says, then there is no fear, even if the three worlds were to be destroyed. There is no attachment to the five desirables of the senses. When you recognize Buddha nature, this is how it becomes. And so from this nature, from this Buddha nature, the deity arises, the deities all arise. So there's no need to explain that much further because we discussed that before. But within that nature of mind itself, within Buddha nature, the three kayas are complete and the five wisdoms are complete. And as it is explained in the prayer, and each of those five wisdoms is combined with each other, and it appears in various different ways as the wisdom arises from this nature. So from this nature, the deity is created. And when you sometimes people wonder, and this is good to understand because sometimes people have some doubts about whether or not the deity actually really exists actually. And so for that it is important to understand that a deity is included within one's own mind, is a quality of one's own mind. So therefore, if there is mind, then there naturally is the deity. If you wouldn't have a mind, then also there wouldn't be a deity.
당에서 하고만 성점이 마구 여절이 요나 신지 대내 컨트롤이 소속의 라마 계획진이 랑기애들이 대바서 이치요 봐 라마 되게 랑이 세와요 봐 그냥 답안에 대니가 정체는 다 리티디 찍고만 거 두증하고 지셔 근데 야부 인성 요리 보여 통하는 것도 나오고 지시 들이 지는 양당양도 상못다나 생각 내려고 돈담고 된바 뒤에 막내야 데리 사바자와리 요 말이 특징을 동원이 봐 네 나니 오르토나 실 남성 드림에트 드림에다 세페 드림에트 돈담고 된바 드림에다 그래 이 난가리 드림에 가래 마바살 그 요래 로 드림에다 드림에 생각는 가래리다다 남도 강사하고 요래 남도 셈니 남도 강사 하고 그 시바티 동담에 된바 시바티리 시바티 가지는 요래 실 남성 드림에도 대 드림이变되는 요래 그 가지 요래들은 롱신이 뭐 말을 쇼버 값들이 참참의 요래 니속 감이 요래 대회는 들이 다 따로 그냥이라 소바탄지 나와서 하고 냥이 참지 들이 요래 들인데 뭐 부셔버려 되고
So when we talk about the ultimate truth, maybe there is possible that some might think that is not so clear, don't understand that so clearly. And so, therefore, this book, the Samantabhadra prayer, is really very useful. You should bring it with you, and can also ask your own spiritual teachers, anybody that you trust and that you are devoted to, and who loves you from the depths of his heart. If there is such a teacher, then you can approach them and ask them, just explain this particular verse to me. And this is why we have printed it in 3 languages, in Chinese, English, and Tibetan. So contemplate this book again and again. And although there exist many instructions, many scriptures that explain the ultimate truth, the nature of the mind, nothing is more profound than this book, actually. And this book is very concise in words, but complete in meaning. This awareness is like the awareness the clear awareness that is explained here in context of the ultimate truth is like a lamp flame. So that is why in the end we have also printed this flame in this booklet. And that flame, that light, represents the ultimate truth, the clear awareness. So the outer example is a flame, a light, but it refers to the ultimate nature of the mind. So the light in the mind, the luminosity of the mind, is this clear knowing awareness that recognizes all the thoughts that arise in the mind. And that clear awareness is always present. So that is represented by this flame in the end of the booklet. And also this clear awareness arises sometimes as when we practice and the wind mind enters into the central channel. And also it arises when we are in a deep sleep state, and also when we practice the channels, winds, and drops. So actually all the practices of Vajrayana are really included within this flame, which represents clear awareness.
Tony the Niji in Jerome, telling Jerome what it is. Tapa the Sai, that local second Changmiba, local the Trukan Yore. There was a mato, the Karibato body dinner. Sharon, sorely you're the now I sharon to come. Oh, the down much about the shadow. There is sorry you know, G about the shadow. Daji in Nang the shadow. There is daughter, there is shooter to pass on. Mark the Quanta, that in 7 around the machine. There is that true, indeed, child. You, Daji, ni. There is similar, there is ni child. Ni chawat, the child, the child, that's song. The party was that on morning. That Daddy don't go particularly. Go to Sancho and Jaguar. Legendary partner in Charum Chas or dealing of two you at legendary social type arts. That don't think go and charm without telling of two chili. Oh, new mobile, Dandy, the new mobile, Dungate Hako, Dungishi Parsas. See, Dungate Shili, that she up the donated the dog, Gona. Oh, that's on some ground. Oh, Dungate or Dandy is. Dandy no matter now till Dungate to come out. To the Sancho and go, you got me. The region that a lagon had the courage, just Sancho with good in my hand. Sancho to go home, Meva to the lagon. Kara joy, Jolly no. Thought that the Atlantic team party. Teach all the over this Sancho sent. Sancho said, don't come to Dandy the tone of your way. Then Sancho was just in Karina, they are the devil in Jolly Tongue. Dandi Jinsen, Delhi, Da Ben Jubatamji, Lunkoval the Tron, Senkoval the Tron, Matava, Dandi control to your mind. That is your lord. They Madovina. They call it good nature, Sancho Senji, Gozi. Good old Sancho Senji, Yona. They take a Dandi Charson, Tonda, Sancho Senji, Ramji, Leone. They will Sancho Sen Namanita, Sije. Sancho Sen Sosol, Yori, send the junior more, Charon Davet. Charon the good of Sancho Senji, the Ninja Davet. Ninja Chibuchi, Charon the Shosona. Oh, Saji Kakatoya, then Charon the Shoson, Charon the Ramji Challenger, Charon Raman Toso, Sanji Hibadi. Sanji Gina made or Rajar to the Tato Sanji, oh, Rang Sintaran Sanji. That's how they do it. Oh, Rasin Sanji and more Machiti. Then Sanji began to have songs. Namdo Chuka Jatoma, Namdo the Mubos and Timber Madina, Tama Chuka Chuka the longer shot. Three data was chilling, three Tamalari Pesomana, it's Tomato, Tito with Cheddar, three Lambden Baston, the Vesong. Somebody hit. The Jamju Domazi, Carter Sabadi and the Terra. You know, Yipti Pana, Sotagoba sound. You know, the Batanging of Medosa. You know, Pingos on the Lottie, Kayamatam, the Pingos on the Lottie Zona. That's not just about Pingos on the Lottie. That Porto. You didn't get Anandong, Madon Tango. There is Madon and Doyore. Ma, Chibat, you get Anandina. Jelly, Tawad. This Jelly Quacha and Tanang Chibat. The Japon Catalan, the young Lama Jewish, I don't know what it is. Lombo Samutan sort of Zia, you need to pingo, Sagittary, Yonti, Yore, Sotokia, Kayam in the Chonk and Yamson Yongo, Nonly, Dita with the Yig, Hakon, Pisa, something. They take it three sort of kitty, giant.
So the nature of mind possesses those qualities of the three kayas and the five wisdoms. And yesterday we have mentioned this example with the crystal and the sun touching the crystal. And so the crystal is an example of Buddha nature, of emptiness, empty Buddha nature. And the sun is an example of compassion. And the sun and the crystal directly meet. The sun shines on the crystal. So the outer example is the sun and the crystal, referring to the inner, what it points to actually, the union of emptiness and compassion, the merging of emptiness and compassion. And from there, from that union, the deity, the pure deities, the Sambhoga Kayas and also Nirmana Kayas, and their pure lands emerge and then appear like the rainbows in the sky. So why have we not realized that? So it is because we have grasped at the outer reflection, the objects that appear to us, like the reflection coming from the crystal. So first, there appears a perception of I. And because there is a self-perception, also there occurs a separation and others appear. So then there appears a duality of self and others. So that is created by the grasping of an I, ultimately. And that obscuration is called this subtle obscuration to omniscience, to knowing the nature of the mind. And so if we do not know the nature of the mind, not recognize our true nature, we are confused. And confusion means to be confused by dualistic grasping. And then everything appears in this dualistic way. There is this duality of the outer universe and the inner sentient beings, the duality of self and others, and so forth. Everything that appears to the mind appears in this dualistic manner. And that is what we call the ice. The mind becomes like a block of ice. So the confused mind is like a block of ice. Therefore, what needs to be destroyed in order to melt the ice back into water is self-grasping. And self-grasping is only destroyed by cultivating conventional or relative bodhicitta. That begins with understanding the workings of karma, cause and effect, the pratimoksha path. We are introduced to the workings of karma and the difficulty to obtain a precious human life and death and impermanence and so on. And we understand that self-grasping, our afflictions, are the root cause of our suffering. So first the Buddha said you have to recognize suffering. And then, having recognized suffering, if you wish to become free from suffering, then that leads ultimately to the bodhisattva path, the bodhisattva vow, because then you recognize that the actual root of suffering is self-grasping. And for as long as you do not separate from self-grasping, you will never become free from suffering. So it is necessary to cultivate bodhicitta. And this is then also how we need to practice the deity yoga practice. We meditate on the deity and we recite the mantra on the basis of bodhicitta. Because if we lack bodhicitta as we practice the deity and recite the mantra, then that could lead to birth as hungry spirit hovering through space. And that is what creates those worldly gods. So it is necessary to cultivate bodhicitta, because all the faults come from self-grasping. Whatever you practice on the basis of bodhicitta will only result in happiness. Happiness will lead to happiness. And if you give rise to self-grasping in whatever you do, then you will not become liberated from suffering. And then some practitioners, some Dharma practitioners, even though it seems their body is liberated from samsara, their mind is still not liberated from samsara as long as they have not separated from self-grasping. So in order to separate from self-grasping, it is necessary to cultivate first the relative bodhicitta. If you possess bodhicitta, there will be no self-grasping. And when self-grasping falls apart, then the ultimate bodhicitta will naturally dawn in your mind. So this is how we accomplish the twofold bodhicitta then together. So first we need to recognize that the quality of this ultimate truth, bodhicitta, is already contained within your own mind. It is your Buddha nature. But this Buddha nature, this mind has frozen into a block of ice for the time being. But it's still the same mind. It only needs to be melted by cultivating the relative bodhicitta, cultivating great compassion. And great compassion will melt this block of ice. And once it melts, it is still the same water. It has not become nothing else. It just has melted. And then the ice, then having melted, has attained freedom. And so therefore it is said, you should not seek the Buddha elsewhere, but find the Buddha in your own mind. When you attain enlightenment, you realize that your own mind actually is the Buddha. Also, in the practice of Mahamudra, it is said, beings do not recognize their own mind to be Buddha. And today, when you attain enlightenment, you realize your own mind is the Buddha. And it also says, and beings do not recognize their own thoughts to be in Dharmakaya. So if you do not grasp at thoughts and they dissolve, then all these thoughts dissolving are the Dharmakaya or Sambhogakaya, according to Milarepa's teachings. So this is how how you should also request your teachers to explain that further to you. And so then also some words regarding the refuge vow card that you have received. Actually, we have printed that newly, and everything really is contained within this card. For example, for the Patimoksha vow, for example, it says completely giving up harming others So that completes the individual liberation vow, the pratimoksha vow. So it begins with not causing any harm to others. And then from that then arises a wish to help, to benefit others. And even if we can't, at least we have the aspiration to benefit them. And that completes the bodhisattva's vow. And through the bodhicitta, this altruistic mind, the self falls apart. And then naturally we come to the Vajrayana vow. It says when one is adept at the pure perception of the vessel and contents, that is the mantric vow. So the vessel and contents, the universe and sentient beings. And when self-grasping falls apart, you begin to understand the pure nature of the entire universe and sentient beings, and that is the essence of the tantric vow. So you should look at this card again and again, and also ask your teachers about it, because it is very meaningful. And I really thought about how to create this, how to design this card for many years, what to put on this card. And I was really thinking what would be of greatest benefit. And everything, all the qualities of the Buddha Dharma that the Buddha had taught is actually contained. And everything that needs to be practiced is essentially contained. So when I found those verses, I thought that I should really include that, because that will definitely benefit a lot of people. So this is why I've created this very specific new card.
산지 semji 뉴지 예측 ram니스 딩원에 다다 제름 걸 갖는 조법 값서 추탐치 당호 내롭도 고요래 너주이게 너주 다낭 종는 하당통 상하는 조법세 봐 다낭 차고요래 상하가 최축하는 다낭 지발이 때는 너주이가 다 거래 대마다나 랑집부 저 평감점시에서 딱 봐서 뒤잡나 연구요래 이 마다바 나나 상하냠니 제야 요 말이 그 이전에서 와하거나 그 정보 담아라서 송화리 나시 라콜 고발지 상하 제름 파좀 소소 문이 상하 이제 따왔던 거 시송타나 제름 라진 그 잡대요 오 소소직 동 마도네 담이 이게 똑바리문이 이전에 딱바리 샤스 다쳐당 처럼지들 톱서 하고 그래 되게 라고나 내가 마도바 탐지 라지 동인 접다바디 하고 저거 나시 라고 고발지 있어야 강이지 다다고도 나지 느끼니 알래 그래도 느끼 장매 봐래 장매 봐야는 뭐 직발에 동다고 직 마도 요마 직이야 요발에 나 과다 차대 그래 동담도 냠바친 뭐지 동담도 냠바친 뭐지나 죽어야지 죽으면 좀 맞았지 오늘 것도 다 빠져보고 딱 것도 주지가 나와도 다 탐지 나 다마다 이게 나와오나 대 마다가 나와도 다 보고 당보 마다가 나와도 당심 차대요 마다가 나와도 당심 차나 딱고 나와도 착발이 저들다 다마다 니 요니 정도 딱고 나와도 노차리 마다가 나와도 세당이들 대니 성도 전에 또 먹더니 요거들이 내가 운이 싸워 또 토끼요 말이지 그 너끼가 이제 딱 빨리 하고 송잖아 다 마다번 하고 소속은 봐요 마도 동운이 그때 마다번 지금 독잖아 하고 송잖아 그래 소속한 게디 마다번 똑같이 좀만요 봐대는 거 고고탑디 요거 하고 오호 나 노스동스 제다와 하고 그래서 하다가 이제 속발해 나만도 송전 합지지 하정대 sem지는 여보래
So we have said Buddhas and sentient beings have a single basis, and yet there are two paths. So when we practice the creation stage of the Vajrayana, the The purpose of this practice, of Vajrayana practice, is to realize the nature of all phenomena of the universe of sentient beings, the nature of the mind. And the essential quality of practicing the Vajrayana, as it is in the refuge card, is to train in a pure perception of the universe and sentient beings. So in order to enter the path of Vajrayana, we need to train in such a pure perception. That is the foremost feature of the Vajrayana, to perceive the universe and sentient beings purely. And so that means that as you practice the Vajrayana, and if you would only see, you visualize yourself in a pure way, your aggregates, sense sources, and elements are pure. But if only you visualize yourself in this way, but not the entire universe appears purely, you're actually not practicing the Vajrayana properly. All need to appear as purity. Drikung Master Drikung Dhammaratsa had said, when you see everything that appears and exists as the form of the deity, that is the perfect creation stage of secret mantra. When you truly understand the basic view of secret mantra Vajrayana, you understand that the creation stage, the deity, naturally exists. So it is only that we have not seen that due to our dualistic grasping. Our grasping at pure and impure, our dualistic grasping. For this reason we have not realized, but in the actual nature of the universe and beings is actually pure. So when you realize that, then in an instant it is like the ice melting into water. And that will accomplish the purpose of others and self simultaneously. So from this verse of Dhammaratsa, it says, everything that appears and exists is the deity. So everything that appears and exists, that refers to the universe and sentient beings. And although that is limitless, they are limitless, they have a single essence. Ultimately, there is a single essence. And ultimately, even that single essence does not inherently exist. That single essence also exists just like space. So on the ultimate level, there only exists a great equanimity that we call Dharmakaya, within which nothing truly exists, nothing is established. In the beginning, on a conventional level, when we begin to practice, we first need to purify our impure perceptions. Because for the time being, we have pure and impure perceptions. All kinds of phenomena appear to us. So first we need to purify those impure perceptions into pure perceptions. The impure perception basically is a mind of aversion. And from our perspective then, since we have an impure perception, the pure perception, then whatever we perceive as pure, then actually has the nature of attachment and desire, because we still have this impure perception, which becomes aversion. And so then together, attachment and aversion lead to a deluded mind, and a deluded mind will not recognize its own nature. So first we need to understand the pure nature of the universe and all sentient beings. First we purify our impure perceptions and realize that things are not actually impure. There's nothing that exists that is actually impure. This is only my own confused perception, but this is not how it really is. And so when you habituate to that, you will think eventually that when a thought of impurity arises, you can recognize that thought as unreal, almost like a deception, something that deceives you, leads you astray, a mistaken perception. And when you see it in this way, then you have planted the root for actual Vajrayana practice. And so these words, this quote by the Jigong Dhammaratsa, are really very blessed words, and it would be good if you would keep them in mind.
오늘 사지 좀 뒤지게 대답을 송함되는 사지 좀 뒤지게 심지 남는 상계인이 있지. 심지 탐지 사지의 정보 요 때문에 오 낭바라 사지의 정보 요 서와리 요말 라비오말 사지 없는데 샘디 오늘 사지의 심지 남는 상계인이 되나 갑좀 심지 탐지 샘들 상계인 저래 온장 로를 준비 집스 로를 좀 다 되기 르다 사지의 마르크 심지 고는 르다 마르크 제발 마도 이제 있는 때 제발 마도 매 대회는 사지 심지니가 샘리송아 대제송 그 심지 강리송 마르과리송 마르과리송아 대다다 사지 그저 가리죠 다 상하 집에 가서 추탐지 고성을 하기 추람 탐지 고성을 하기라도 사지 고성 그 공도 마주 발에 고성 그 사고 강리들 생고 내려고 이제 내려고 하나 용띠 첨부 섬요래 사지에 탐나 고성 단위 사지 종들이 사지를 고성 요래서 그 요종선 말이 오 찍을 달이 신아시 오 찍라 용띠 첨주섬 그섬 이신아지 생이 찍 용띠 대랑 그 생을 철단하고 그렇다 저거 세고 내려 통나 되게 오 고성 가도 고성 그 사고 가도 랑 철대나 대랑 그 대공 통도 이시제 강리 랑 그 생이 오 동만 나갔다 그래 타블을 잡도 이 추가가 용띠 대용 뭐 동부지시 ramji sarve shi de ni tongpa ni na kwe ka char chat de bati ngo de ka ye shi so ne rang shi ba sa wo de ha ko song oh ma sa de ni na ka ta le sa wo ha ko so la ti sa tong song de jo kwa de na kwe ka char chap song ta de le u de le de me do de le de sa ja ju mo de o na ka chak de thong wa ka kwa jer ta jin thong lap to ko ma ma thong lap to ko ma tuk ji ko na cha ba tru ko 뒤에다 차비고 때려 톡 지에 가지고 따라야 돼. 뒤 속에 마시나까 동이 빠도면 봐 용거 요래. 내가 차름도 차는 도와는 코는 도고 요래지. 예, 고소디 제식 뭐 요배 타톡 성진이 돼 매지. 가서 신진 총용리 삼지게 로그요라. 동자 hin기 용 동굴이 그 도왕 미성성 요 말이지. 로르도 요 말이지. 상기가 남게 대다오도 하고 내가 마도 받더라 hingi 치고 요리 세면 hingi 뭐 대리 조금 좋아했지 대리 조금 좋나 조금 달 로아를 참아 조금 거기서 요래서 로아를 조금 가야가 더 말이 쌤 내식님 뭐 연바나 다른 답을 기회시니 저 연구 요리 마다 받는 로아를 또 속차 똑같이 데려서 왔다면 샤용 요리 성성 샤용 요리 이제 저기 말들 남이 그 제발 들다 들지니가 조금 그 광수 요배나 들이다다 무슨 잠빌링 되나 근데 답과리데 제야 요만 나 마다 봐도 제야 요만 섬체 대신님 뭐 요리 저거들 들자 심지 다다 들자 그 심지 탐지야 미르가 들지 자가 탐지지만 미르가 그래 미 중지 저기 따바찍고 갈라찍고 와서 요리들 그냥 샘 가까리다 코랑 등을 조르지 등을 조르 탑도 하고 나도 등이 그 등 라소제 그 요리 뒤 제발 그 뒤에다 제발 때 요배는 다 들자게 가자 탐지 쪼그레 내가 괜찮은 다 그래 들지가 사축선 봐 탐지 쪼그레다 이 대 산촉성 때서 요바 시합 용띠 요바 탐지를 다 기르지인지 땅 바꿔야 되는 딱 요리 레전드 시바 탐지라 대 마토바 탐지들이 난이 찍고 말더니 미바지 얘는 내가 왜 봐도 저처럼 또 동문이 같으니 대신에 보는 줄 아면 되나 동문이 생기지 따오는 점에 되나 그래 따뜻한 남주 생기니 차잖아 운이 마다와 직접 매도 삼나 는 뒤주 단한 줄 마당 창지 선은 직디는 용왕아리 중앙의 형마지 유목마리 라주 요바리 당마지 신가리 들이 나가서 제가 요래 그 이신가지 스님 거선 그 대라오는 들이 신가살 용기 좀 나살 대레선 중앙 나살 이 형마지들이 마도바리 다 유목나살 들이 다 꼬라장 들이 쟤네들이 로봇은 다 찍도 좀 돼봐야지 내가 라니 소주면은 송바다들 들이 다대 조로 탑라 내가 마다만 처럼 따베테 처럼도 시와 탑라 다 남도 봤으면 제는 다 상지게 주주고 제제동 까봐 장미 발라 새끼 장미 봐 들이 주주고로 장미 봐 대외 송바리
The Buddha himself had said, within all sentient beings is the Buddha. And that is because all sentient beings possess Buddha nature. And so the Buddha said all sentient beings. The Buddha did not say only the Buddhists have Buddha nature and the non-Buddhists do not have Buddha nature. He didn't say that. He said all sentient beings in the three realms of samsara possess the cause of enlightenment, Buddha nature. But also the Buddha said, however, sentient beings are obscured by temporary stains. So the difference between Buddhas and sentient beings is just awareness or unawareness. If you recognize the nature of mind, you are a Buddha, and if not, you are a sentient being wandering in samsara. That is the only difference. But both the Buddhas and sentient beings appear from the same mind. So how do sentient beings arise? They arise from unawareness, ignorance. And according to the Vajrayana, how they possess the cause of enlightenment, what is the cause of enlightenment that they possess? According to the Vajrayana, it says all phenomena have the nature of the three kayas. There is nothing whatsoever that is not included in the three kayas. So that cause of enlightenment that sentient beings possess is the seed of the three kayas already present in their mind. So they possess those three great qualities of the three kayas that is inherent to the nature of their mind. And then the Buddha is one who has fully actualized, is the embodiment of the three kayas. So those three kayas are not three separate existing things, but they are different qualities of a single nature. So it is said from a single nature there arise the five wisdoms or the three kayas. So these are all qualities of a single nature, which is the mind itself. And you can understand how these qualities are complete within your mind by looking at your own mind, seeing your own mind. You can see how and where those three kayas actually are. And when you see it based on your own observation, you will develop trust. So how the three kayas remain in your mind, or are present in your mind. First, the Dharmakaya. The essence of the mind is empty, like space. It is all pervasive and has no center and no boundary. That is the quality of the Dharmakaya in your mind. So its essence is empty primordial awareness, primordial wisdom. And then secondly, however, there is also the quality of a natural clarity, natural clear awareness. There is an awareness, a clear knowing awareness that knows its own empty space-like pervasive nature, its empty essence. There is a clear awareness that knows my nature is empty and pervasive like space. So there is a clear knowing capacity, and that is the quality of the Sambhogakaya. And then these two are a union. Clear awareness and emptiness are one, pervading everywhere without center and boundary. In Mahamudra teachings, we say that this union of clarity and emptiness is all pervasive great compassion. And that quality is the quality of the Nirmanakaya. It is, there's nothing that is not pervaded by it. So the compassion extends to those who have not realized this, because those who have not realized this experience unbearable suffering. Temporarily, their mind is like eyes and they wander in samsara. But they still always possess Buddha nature, and ultimately they are Buddhas. Ultimately, there are no sentient beings. Those of you who have practiced Yamantaka before, in one verse there it says, ultimately there is no object of compassion. So ultimately, that is to say, there are no real sentient beings. There are no real 3 lower realms and so forth. Because ultimately all have the nature of Buddha. And until they have realized that, Nirmanakayas appear out of immeasurable compassion for those unrealized beings. But it is said that actually all the beings in the 6 realms, all the 6 realms of samsara are actually Nirmanakaya by nature. So how are the 6 realms Nirmanakayas? It is because they all possess mind, and mind is Buddha nature, and that is always pure. So from a pure perspective, a pure Nirmanakaya, there appears the pure Buddha nature appears as the Nirmanakaya manifestation of the spiritual teachers. And the sentient beings, the impure Nirmanakayas, are the various sentient beings appearing in all the different realms, all the life forms, no matter how frightening they appear, their bodies, the 3 lower realms and so forth. They still all are Nirmanakayas, because ultimately their mind is a single basis. So both those who tame and those to be tamed are actually Nirmanakayas, because they all possess Buddha nature. So in this world, for example, when you look into this world with this understanding, then you will see nothing impure, because all are Nirmanakayas, all possess Buddha nature. For example, in the human world, sentient beings to be tamed are human beings. And then those who tame those tameable ones, for example, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, also is a human being. So they look the same. They are all human beings. They eat the same food. They do the same things. However, their mind is different, because someone like His Holiness, for instance, a spiritual master, has become already liberated from suffering, and therefore is able to show the path or the method to liberation also to others. And we, on the other hand, the impure Nirmanakayas, we encounter suffering and often even commit suicide. So the difference lies only within the mind. But both of them are Nirmanakayas. So the sentient beings to be tamed are Nirmanakayas, only temporarily their mind is like ice. And then those who tame the Bodhisattvas, then of course they are Nirmanakayas. And there are those who possess some Bodhichitta and wisdom, and those beings appear then as our spiritual masters. And we call them noble or superior beings, because they know the workings of karma, cause and effect. And inferior beings who are not superior, inferior beings are temporarily inferior only because they grasp at a self, only because temporarily their mind is like a block of ice. But still, ultimately, their true nature is Buddha nature, and that never changes. So ultimately, there is no sentient being to be found. There is nothing impure that ultimately exists. So when we practice Vajrayana, and this is the main point to train in, to develop a pure perceptions towards the universe and sentient beings. And so the outer universe that we know consists of the 5 elements. And the degenerated essence of these 5 elements manifests as the 5 afflictions. And the pure essence, the refined essence of them, manifests as the 5 wisdoms. So that is the nature of the 3 kayas and the 5 wisdoms. Whatever appears as the self-reflection of those 3 kayas and 5 wisdoms. So those 5 qualities, those 5 wisdoms manifest as various manifestations, as the 5 elements. And so from an impure perspective, the manifestations therefore of the 5 afflictions appear, and we wander in samsara. In the 37 practices, it says in the beginning, they, like the spiritual masters and so on, make single-minded effort for the sake of sentient beings. So therefore, because there are still those sentient beings wandering in samsara, those great beings who tame sentient beings always give a method to liberation. They provide a method to melt the ice block, the impure perception. And this is how the 3 levels of the path have emerged. This is why the Buddhas and the masters of the past have taught the Dharma, turned the wheel of Dharma. This is why the Buddha had taught the 84,000 Dharma teachings throughout infinite aeons for the purpose of infinite sentient beings.
나사 시바제바지라 들이오디 삼진마 잡아요래 강이나 사이시바라더니 사람티바디 사리리 되는 것으로 다포리는 라마리들이 말이 이시바 자와 삼지 싫어도 찍대 죽었나 과다지 배는 것으로 다포리는 라마리 말다 다라도 여기 또 같이 내 요래들 사삼들이 말이 이시디 죽거든 죽을 상계로 파담보 상계도 죽을 상계도 죽었지만 남카다 그래지 대 가도도 서라고 세고 내로로 서라 하시는 때나 다방은 내로도 샘나 갔다 싹싹으로 사탑지 지가 대답을 대사래 대는 적당 지만 이었다 잡아 나그 세고 내로 제다 하고는 매 대게 죽고 하고 죽은 남카다 드니들 롱고 야통다 어디디 다들이 돈이 등 hin기성도 좋고 같은 사브라지 사브 차들 나와 나도 샤리는 거래 고대니 나와라면 샤리는 거래 제일 안내더니 hin기집에 잘래 들 마도 없으면 담지라 들 라시아와다 초 정말 봐 차리는 거래 이 차로들 이 치와라 나파 강화 건나 좋고요래 나que까지 찹디요래 총화나 하정 차와더니 용조삼 이건 좋고요. 강의지나 배나 속에 제름 공부값을 담책 선바지 이시 선바지 땡기지 선바 사바슴적 공부요리 제가 땡기지 선바 하정 차비차 총총 공부 동대리 누구보다 지금보다 제만 만들어봐 하정 총리들이 따로가나 요네 봐 깨는 건 다지 죽어라 봐 로고 요래 로슬람 간다고 대위는 하정 타와 보면 좋고 요래 배나 배는 것도 또마 총총들 뒤나나 좀 사진한 게더니 사진 꼭 다음에 봐고 내 좋고 요래 배나 시에서는 남과 다들냐면 이제 거는 남과들 ramji 그 것들데 조항아의 ram지인데 자와는 아기야면 그 ram지 대로도 최고 총 가리고는 조기요래에서는 남고 대시거래 배는 관거든 그 또는 거다가 내가 사탐지 차성 창고요래 이 창원들 대하자 네 족 창원도 많이 버들이 내가 고나비 진바다 대와다 네바 똑좀 쳐드는 진바 대와 네바 썸이오바 대사버드는 사이시바들라 최종 가래고나 줘봐 슬라 가래고나 슬라 대속들이 배운 거를 그랬더니 자비양고나 슬라 삽지 자비양고 타는 거요래 도진 남주만 보면 사삽지 도진 남주 뭐 배운 거요래 대서 우보다 속동심을 맞아빼 讲了东半年了，这里这样的原因。
So the qualities of the deity, the wisdom being, the wisdom deity, are immeasurable, inconceivable, and they are unlike ordinary forms of gods and deities. So when we look at them from an ordinary perspective and think of all those different deities, what might come to mind is that we have like an array of caves, and in each of them you place one deity, like Milarepa, for example. But then this is not how we understand the wisdom deities to be. So we understand the wisdom deities first of all on the basis of the Dharmakaya. When that deity had attained enlightenment, they had attained enlightenment in the Dharmakaya, the space-like Dharmakaya. And that you can see when you look at your own mind and abide within this union of clear awareness and emptiness that abides like space. So just like that, and within that nature, the essence of the deity also abides. So the actual deity is free from any colors or shapes and forms and so on. So if you understand it this way, such a person who is able to abide in that state, in the nature of one's own mind, can understand how the deity essentially has the nature of the space-like Dharmakaya. So its ultimate nature is like space Dharmakaya. And then the Sambhogakaya form of the deity appears like a rainbow. The union of emptiness and compassion appears in the form of the deity. So the natural clarity of the deity arises in its form. And then various things appear. The various appearances of samsara and nirvana. Various appearances become manifest, arising from this natural expression of the Dharmakaya. And then as a natural expression of great compassion, the countless peaceful and wrathful deities appear for the purpose of sentient beings who have not realized. So there's different ways of visualizing the deity. You can, for example, visualize the deity very large, filling up the entire space, universe, and being everywhere. Or you can visualize at times a deity very small, just like about the size of a mustard seed. In many different ways. When we practice the creation stage, we visualize in three different types of deities or beings. There is the Samaya being, there is the wisdom being, and then the very subtle Samadhi being. And it becomes more and more subtle in visualization and very small. And that is also to lead us to understanding that the deity also lacks inherent and true or any substantial existence. So as it becomes smaller and smaller, ultimately we only rest within the view, the nature of the mind. So the creation stage ultimately is a path that leads to the Dharmakaya. So in the end we end up in resting in the Dharmakaya, and therefore we visualize smaller and smaller. Or for example, we prepare sometimes a dorma representing the deity, and even though the dorma is very small, still all the Buddhas of the 3 times and limitless mandalas of deities can all be included within that small dorma. So you can see it in that way, or you can visualize that there are infinite mandalas filling up the entire space, the entire universe. So the universe consists of the 5 elements, and these have the nature of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas with consorts. So you can visualize it either in a larger or smaller form. So first, this is what we need to understand. And so also when we receive empowerment, there's also a dorma often that we have, and with a picture of the deity on that dorma. And all the deities are included within that dorma completely. And here we also need to understand that the deity is not just the form of the deity, but the deity possesses the qualities of knowledge, of omniscient knowledge, of great love, and power to protect. So these qualities are included in the wisdom deity, the wisdom being within the Dharma, for example. And that you can visualize in any kind of different way, larger or smaller and so on. But whatever deity you're practicing in any specific time, you can think that all the deities that appear, that descend, appear in the form of this particular deity. For example, if you're practicing Manjushri, then all the deities appear in the form of Manjushri. Or if you're practicing Vajrayogini, then all the deities appear and come into the mandala in the form of Vajrayogini. And so anything can be visualized because the deity itself lacks inherent substantial existence. So it is that anything can arise within emptiness.
Zong Jatong Tao Tela Yamne Chara Yomati, Yichiba Sachiba Zong Jatong Tao Yambara, Nimeva. Tachiba, Java Tamji Shilon, the Chikiba Toti, Yang Chilla, Teletini, Tata, Roma Mambori, Kachitra Mambo Tagado, Tamta so the Sundang Ray or Tang, Menos Hajaban, one Rican, Yijin, Sati, Dice Ron, Yamari regular, one category logos on Muyore. Tell you this something much about Yore. Yellow Tomadam Minicena, Satamji, Slag Gojete, Kanza, Take Lunga, Eaton with Dapata, Jerem Latin, Rigid Dapata, Naga Dapata, Sancho Semi Dapata, Kanza Rans Hangi, Gumena. Slatamji, flying on, Ishibatamji, taking Badang. Kanza, the Papa on, Rangan to talk about Mato. Tondang military, slap Jagawan, slap chicken, don't do the bar. Day and the Hiori, Yelam more to our aid. Yelam Sla, really, Tamsa is on one yore, Shana, one yore, Kappa, Tang me by the Sla. Simply Tang me bari, then do Panamana to Tang me bar, to Sanamana to do some Namana to Yena Yang. Tatoka in Gorsan took some G me by Jura. Jill Tamtek Sanchok some G, Tamtek, Sanchok and Naman took the Yore. Engineer took the Yore and Jill, Japan Bella, the very Jaga Romani Hama. Sla Jigger one to the Matical Sati, drop 3 songs. Then it's a Dokuyori. Top to the Zamka, you switch a sheet of your money. You Jaga Matical Hajig. The Buddha that are Mambo Yore, they have Jir, and the Kayori, the Yana drop Chico Yore. They go at the Chabi, song than the Mambo Yore. That's a baby Jim or Goldman. Yana Tondamuni. Slap Jag one to a slap chick, you came with Yaminchina. They are saying, Yamin, Tawa Tam Tick by Hadding so. Was going to Tam Tick by Jim, Tam Tick by two Santok over in Yippee Lothy. Carry two quality Tavi Ched, that's how the heart of Yamin Jackery, that's a hand Yamin Jackery. Two quality Tagon to Dandi Tago. Dandi the Tagon to slap Jag on the Santok Semina, to Dandi the Major. 주 산지고 뭐 톱톱고 요만이 코발에 탑톱고 요만이 대회나 산쪽sem도 따와는 산쪽sem도 slag 소문이 산쪽sem이 했 이제 대중용보다 사던 가서 찍과리 했 매도 지금 농보다 사디 매도 따와이나 그럼 그게 소품도 매도 감봤다 그 사고 소마디 매도 뉴따가 차디요 뉴찍과 차디 대다버도 집에 쭉 강리전 쪼데 사이 소 토바나더니 도망 탐척지 봐지 나 탐척 봐이 특기를 피고 선을 로테 맞다네 들이대 사이 공동 상주공제들 탐척 봐지 들이대는 사들은 hin지 정보를 사는 hin지에다 소속 사드 삼지 찍과 착거요 들이 양당에 무소 산쪽선 총총마도 요 말이 제가 산 산쪽선 치고 요래 또 가래 산쪽선부 또지 레몬 거래 때 또더니 다 산지기 용지 정말 통불 사님의 피용 산쪽선 담을 내고래 대변 담체가 산쪽선이 산바닥 hin지 심지 피용 삼을 로상 맞아 대외지 말들이 니처럼 보러는 봤다 찍로나 이제 보통 가면 보통 대래 대외 담책선 받도 생기는 피고 섬을 로체도 말하거나 담책선 봐지
And so the wisdom deity, the wisdom being, the wisdom deity is a union of emptiness and compassion and nothing else. That's all that the wisdom deity is. A wisdom being is the union of emptiness and compassion. And that is what distinguishes them from worldly gods. Because worldly gods, they still are not separate from self-grasping. Even though their bodies might appear like a deity, like a god in a rainbow-like form, but worldly gods still possess self-grasping and therefore thoughts of attachment and aversion, and therefore they still suffer. And because they still suffer, sometimes they might help us, and sometimes they might also harm us, because they themselves are not separate from suffering. They're worldly beings, and they are therefore subject to disintegration. So it is not the rainbow-like form that is the point in the deity now. What makes the wisdom being a wisdom being is that union of compassion and emptiness. It is not the form of the deity, but the deity's nature is a non-dual nature, in whichever form it appears. All within primordial wisdom, all the Buddhas are one. So that is what you should bring to mind again and again. And so often also, there's one thing that disciples often ask, disciples who practice and come from various different lineages, because in each lineage it is explained often in just slightly different ways. For example, in the Sakya lineage, when you receive an empowerment of a deity, then you are required to read the daily practice of that deity each and every day. You must go through that practice each and every day. And of course, if you do that, that is really an incredible, great quality. But then also, from the perspective of the ultimate truth, ultimately, we also need to see what is the actual purpose of practicing the deity. The reason why one practices a deity is because by practicing the deity, we purify our obscurations of body, speech, and mind. By visualizing the deity, the creation stage, we purify the obscurations of the body. By reciting the mantra, we purify obscurations of the speech. And by cultivating bodhicitta, we purify the obscurations of the mind. So that is why one practices the deity. And when all these obscurations are purified, then there is no difference between oneself and the wisdom deity. Then one has the same essence. One ultimately has already the same essence. Only the practitioner must purify their obscurations of body, speech, and mind. And so, since all the deities have the same essence, If you would only practice a single deity, it would be just as practicing 100 deities. It would be the same. And of course, each deity and each empowerment has their own specific samaya that we keep. There are so many different deities and empowerments because throughout many aeons there have appeared countless sentient beings, and they all have countless aspirations and mental capacities. There's a great variety of sentient beings, and so there's a variety of deities and empowerments. However, what they all have in common is they all are based on the motivation of bodhicitta. That is the root of all deity practice, the twofold bodhicitta, which is the union of mindfulness and compassion. And so therefore, any deity will lead to the same result. For example, in old India, the siddhas would actually, there is a tradition for the siddhas to actually only receive the empowerment of a single deity and then practice that one deity for their entire life. And then they keep that as their personal secret deity and would only practice that. But then in Tibet, then it became different. There are many deities and people practice different deities. So either way is fine. But what is important is that we know how to properly practice the deity. And so with regard to that, Atisha also gave many teachings, but now there's no need today to mention many examples. But in brief, it is excellent if you have one deity that you practice continuously on an ongoing basis. So there's a Maya being that we mentioned, and that is you visualizing yourself as the deity on the basis of bodhicitta, altruism. So how you become the Samaya being is you want to become liberated from samsara. In order to become liberated, you practice the path of Pratimoksha, Bodhisattva, and Vajrayana. And so now here specifically, you practice Vajrayana. In order to become liberated from samsara, however, you must become liberated from self-grasping. If you do not let go of self-grasping, if you do not cultivate bodhicitta, even if you practice 100 deities, you will not attain enlightenment. You will not become liberated from samsara. So the root of the deity, the life force of the deity, is bodhicitta. And essentially, your nature and the deity's nature are the same. Your Buddha nature and the deity's mind are the same. So for example, the deity is like a flower, and the Vajramasta is like a flower bud, and the disciple who receives the empowerment is like a sprout, a shoot of a flower. But the continuum is still the same flower, it is the same continuum. So that is the Samaya being, which is you seeing yourself as the deity, holds the Samaya, holds the life force of the deity, which is to never separate from a wish to help and benefit sentient beings. And then on the basis of that wish, you visualize yourself as in the form of the deity with all its implements and so on, and you become the Samaya being. So the deity, the actual deity, the wisdom being's nature is compassion. And therefore, if you give rise to compassion, then your mind is exactly the same. And we all do have some small bodhicitta. It is just that the deities have great bodhicitta, and that is very powerful. It has already attained all the qualities of the Buddhas. So in the beginning, before we engage in practice, it is necessary to give rise to bodhicitta, to hold the samaya of love and compassion, the ongoing wish to benefit sentient beings. And from then on, we engage in deity yoga practice. And so if you have that as a basis, then it is up to you. Then if you would like to read a sadhana on a daily basis, then that is fine. But even if you do not read the text on a daily basis, it is still fine for as long as you uphold the samaya of wishing to benefit sentient beings.
then the Jerem Shipadia, Jerem Shipadana Tona Mambo Yuri. Just outside Jerem the Latini, good G, Charlotte, Mangu de Catechera, all that the tongue chicken around. Think Minijina had tongue Pimbachembo Yuri. This is your carrera. Della da, Tom, some the Sanghang, Tondi, Tawan, to go Marie, Tamaka part in a Mujit the Lavare. Oh, Jambi young treasures on doxy. Coming into what Dani is Sarisi. That's the social goal races here. Number have a trust on. You told La Toviche, Yavium Travati last of what I'm doing. Zook the Tavo called it Agiori. This Sahani Marita, Sanga Shivati, Sang Dati, Jambi young trust on the Oris. Dati, trust it, some of the race. Don't carry Danding Tang Numo, da may Bahako, da Chiva you someday. She up in Japan to the shop of bed. She up in Dati Kano Tena. The da may be told that was that. Sorry, eating, make you could you that torture double job dinner. That Jata Dati told the Toya Yoma. Da Toya maybe. Some hinges on Monday, she up in some day. She told it in Dame Bahakon. Don't die, what? That Jumde Cheta, Chepata, someone when you that may be the Hako, that may be Hako at them. She took your material. Some Hatam, your party, G. Charun, Drama, and Zibo. Zibo, your teeth, there is no say the tar it. None of the Dashi or don't need the carry. Oh, Daddy, Dame Hako, Daddy, top the Nani Toa. Tell it, Tawatini, Dame Bahakona, Gomba, Globa Tamje got me. Dini, Tadam Moton, Topan Ramadan, death of the two Tokyo, Shirab the Dini, Soto Shirab the Dini, top Tokyo, Yunti, Teta Teta. This is another to whom he put a top to the get out the dinner. The Rangan Koranga, Topa, Sokanagi, Meti, don't want to watch Amato. So I'm not going to tell you, go at the Tokyo, Nam do you don't call it. The Tokyo, Marian. She up in some mortgage lady. She up my bottom with it. I will have you already. They don't get them, don't have on chamber already.
And so for the creation stage practice, so there are many points to mention about the creation stage practice, and various deities appear in different forms with different implements and so on. And so often the people feel overwhelmed and get not really tired of visualizing all these things. But actually, it is extremely beneficial to practice and visualize the creation stage. And in order to really understand the creation stage, we must see that these outer forms represent something, so that the deity is visualized by means of, we understand it, the visualization is understood by means of signs, symbols, and the meaning. So this is how we understand the meaning of Vajrayana. And if we do not look at it from that perspective, then we will not understand its meaning. For example, some ordinary people just look at the outer appearance. For example, they say Manjushri, for instance, is holding a knife. So he must be a fighter. Who is he stabbing with his knife? So then they say, oh, these Buddhist deities hold these weapons, these knives. And so this is how they would perceive a wrathful deity, or also various perceptions about like union deities like Yab Yum and so on. And that is because they see only the outer form. So this is not how we should regard the outer form of the deities. So first of all, we have said there is a sign. And that sign, in that case, would be Manjushri's knife. That's the sign, the outer sign. And then, or the outer symbol, first the symbol. then the inner sign is, so what's the function of that knife, that sword? It has this quality of cutting. It can cut anything. But then thirdly, what's the meaning of that? What does it cut? What it cuts is self-grasping, the afflictions. And how it cuts that is through wisdom. Wisdom, mind knows that there is no self. So actually, the knife, the sword of Manjushri, is a symbol for wisdom. A wisdom that sees, that knows that a self does not exist. And so that wisdom has inquired into the mind and has come up with the conclusion that a self is nowhere to be found. Even if you try to find it anywhere, for however long, wherever you look, you cannot come up with it. You cannot find that self. So this is what wisdom had realized. And therefore, this wisdom had realized selflessness, emptiness. And so then when we just leave it with emptiness, this wisdom of Manjushri is actually a union of compassion and wisdom. Because if it is just representing emptiness, then many people fall into this extreme of nihilism, just understanding that there is no self. But that is not sufficient. That is not sufficient to cut through all afflictions. So it is very significant really to look at the meaning of each of those implements that the deities possess. Deities appear in various forms, different colors, different implements, some very terrifying and magnificent, and all of that has a very specific meaning. It is an outer sign that points to an inner meaning that we need to understand. And so in this case, it is the cutting through self-grasping, realizing that a self does not exist. And cutting through self-grasping is cutting through all the ropes that bind you through self-grasping. So having realized such a view, then also in one's day-to-day conduct, one is able to cut through various thoughts of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. It is this discriminating wisdom that cuts through all thoughts arising. So somebody who does not understand the meaning of Vajrayana will just look at it as it appears and see it in this defiled way. But actually it is only a misunderstanding, and really because that person itself actually has a defiled view. And within the Vajrayana, actually none of that is actually, if you understand the meaning, none of that is the case. And therefore, somebody who understands that, somebody who possesses wisdom, will just smile at somebody and trying to find the faults in those appearances of the deities. So this is just how some people would put it if they lack this discriminating wisdom. So but in any case, it is important to see that the creation stage is really very, very important.
The Sanabjaya, the Tamakawachi, thing is Sanabjaki, Sanab Mari, Sanabdi, Jimsi machine Yabo, Sanabdi, Matu Goma, Goma Yin Town, Yomari, the Homa, the Jakab Lazy, Nadi Bombo, Chibongs Goma, the Pep, Yore, Janani, the Goma, the Penny. It was one puppy chung such a chung, then such people you're the chimpo on the pep, the pep didn't he? Shinji Magabobo chimpo, the pep. Take it any Chong Shinji, the Shinji, the Nazira. Jana Shinji, or didn't Nazira, was Nazira with any Gomba, Chichong, Gomba Dunja dogs. Just what do the non any to the Gomba Chong race. In the Lord Japama would not any Namian team about any Coroti corner. The Jinsi Juche me but any Givadoba 지도 공부하대 앙탕보리에서 너희들이 누구 아버지 코비 가요래 약합에서 제요래 있는데 로주디시는 하장성 보리 공부 중종원하더니 문제 자고 송진가 믿더니 자자 고조 불아 딘장을 루모가 동진거더니 드리지 자자 고조 그 고딘 조고 유진으로 송진 조고잖아 아마 독진 자시고 말 주진 침보진 가고 독자담때 섬딘장으로래 드린 주진진 감나야 요래 가고 받지 요래 주진 감나요래 그네 사지서 뭐 도성 드니 가고 니요래 아또 가고 맞잖아 요래 다 도성에 도처래
이네 가봐도 담보?
다 요래 말 다요 말이
얼마 가봐도
뭐만디 가고 니요래 가 아또도 가 총진 나는 같이라고 요래 같이는 무슨 공부래 가 총진이지 아또 가고 봐도 아들은 같이 요래 같이 총진 되더라고 요래 그래서 다 중고잖아 맞지 가그 톱 주진 강이 되나 감되게 잡어대 가동지게 동주에 감되게 잡어리 가동지게 동주에 들이대는 가 주댕반 총네 들이대 문제 돼서 가동지는 콜로 토바대 들이 뭐그 열었더니 자그마 잡보는 초바잡 조다 콜로 통지 설진지게 잡초가 잡으라 조를 뭐지 자그마 총총지라 야나 마용라 야나 마 통네 들이 고통 특징이 만 촉주지라 들이 지감이더니 조용 배요래 등 콜로데 들이 목이 저래 배네 들이 몽선 몽여지 몽래 롱 찾아다다 저는 가구지 요래 가구 고마 통했잖아 요래 들이 주댕반 통 주댕반 통보 사자래 들이 사자는 되는 게 적디송구나 좁아자 송하고 들 좁아자는 들고 대바지 좁아자도 파요 근데 적디송고 로마지 그래 들이 지금은 가추된 바 되게 들고 좁탑으로 찬 들고 그때 콜로 되느냐 니장 이 가동지가 아마 여러 배역 사더니 들고 된다고야 랑요라 되는 동료들이 이 공부하더니 감나치는 저 편이더니 다 말합제리요래 말합제구나 부종이요래 말합제구나 들이다다 가고 말합제구나 부종이요래 가파롱 공부하더나 요래 들이더니 저 보라 나치는 등장이더니 다다 말합제 우리 다다 공평 제저요래 콜로 디스나 우리 이제 하자 자신 보는데 다다 고등아지 보면 했더니 가다로 그만 용어도 요말 따따다 망치진 오피스를 야요래 이 사람 야야 이 오피스는 사람 야들이 참 직발이 고도 산업 관리 야원을 때문에 거기 야 저거요래 그래서 잠지도 막 때네요 이제 인증 문제 막게 좋은데 들이 저거 저거요래 이 사람 참아 이제 손은 냠놈 보요래 내송 담지 땡기 요래 로주망 보요래 내 송띵사다 내 동사들이 로주망 보요래 들 하장사람 자친 보리 들 잡단 나사 이메오마 내 못봐 요래 들이 빼나 엄마 네 속보로 송나 이게 소자하고 요말 나양디 내 종래 처방보고 소자거라 소지가 자창 말이 문제는 깨라요. 대시와만 보여래 되는 게 좋더라마다. 설라 화장사 아침 무슨 총딩 소고 요래. 되는 이런 그 제대로 맞서 맨다 총각과 로지 빼만 보여래. 되는 감인데 답에 화장사 아침 보고 요래다. 되는 거로지 사람들 되는 사람다다 이래 공이 자 좋고 요래가. 이제 문제 거 잡을 용고 말이. 이 자라 탐질 사람들 잡야 요래. 말아니 양들이 사람 참아 이 다좀 항상성지 참아 라로 그러지 니 사람 됐더니 종종지 매네 자니 설마성 대마 설와지 그만 갖고 가서라 서자월 때 본이 때 말이 그 콜로 쳐 인장이 이 양자다 좋다고 요래 사람다 체슈이도 거는 게 다 체슈이죠 요래 참아 설성이 있는데 소요 말이 정방나네 다당이다 보자 고소라 사람 잡을 때리 This is doing to worry it.
So Rinpoche would like to introduce to you this blessing balm that Rinpoche is always using for all his blessings. And so actually the blessing is within the balm. So therefore anybody could use this balm to bless anything with that. So it is not Rinpoche says I myself who is actually giving the blessing, but it is the balm that gives the blessing. So therefore it would be good if you know a bit about this blessing balm. So this blessing balm actually only exists in our monastery, and you can't get it from anywhere else actually. Before there were various regional officials, high officials who came to our monastery from China, and our monastery actually is quite a small monastery, but it's a very beautiful, nice place. So there was this time when these higher officials came to our monastery in this district, and within this entire state or district there are about 700 monasteries of various sizes, and actually our monastery is still a considerable small monastery, but we have a very precious object in this monastery, and that has been there for centuries. It is this precious prayer wheel that is turning uninterruptedly day and night, continuously. So actually this official praised the monastery and said that this is really excellent, that you really get a merit or virtue continuously, ongoingly, so that you really do it the best in your monastery. So of course there's many more long stories about that, but just to keep it brief, where it comes from, originally it goes back to the time of the king, the Tibetan king Songtsen Gampo. And this king had a minister, Gar Dongtsen, and Gar Dongtsen was sent to China to bring back the Chinese princess, and she brought various holy objects back with her. And so some of them were the precious Chowo statue, and then also very large supa, like 3 stories large, high, and then also this very precious prayer wheel that she brought from China. And so this stupa was actually erected next to the Gar monastery, but then also later was demolished in the revolution. And so at that time it was actually, there's different Gar monasteries belonging to different Gar emanations. So there's a smaller Gar monastery, which is like Gar Chung, and then there's Gar Chen, which means the greater Gar monastery, which is Rinpoche's monastery. And so this prayer wheel was obtained then by this minister Gar Dongtsen, and he brought it back. And so then later there was at the time of when the king of Degem in Kham, there was with the Chinese a war breaking out, and everything had to be hidden and stored. So this minister then hid the Chobo statue and the wheel in a place called Hmong, and so that is actually where the first Gar monastery was established, and it was hidden there for a long time. And in a future life, some generations later, Gar Chudingpa was born, and Gar Chudingpa actually first was from the Sakya lineage, and when he met with Chikden Sungen first, he actually debated Chikden Sungen. But then later he actually became so devoted that he stopped debating him and he became his disciple. And so then Gar Chudingpa, who was also a great Siddha, he was the one who then brought this prayer wheel back from its hiding place. So he brought it back just like revealing a dharma, discovering it again from the earth and bringing it back to the monastery in Kham Nangchen. And so it has then ever since been there, since the first monastery there, for 8 generations. And so in the past, actually, before those 8 generations, before the first Gar monastery was started in Kham, in eastern Tibet, in Kham Nangchen, there was in the center of Tibet, there was a different monastery, the Purung monastery, and that was a previously, and so the prayer wheel was then actually installed only when they moved it to the new monastery in Kham Nangchen, and ever since it has been there, and the sustaining of the monastery for so long really is also due to the blessings of this very special prayer wheel. It is really very precious, and so this balm that Rinpoche is using comes from this prayer wheel, from the butter of this prayer wheel. And Rinpoche said he had only a little bit left, but this year I went back to Tibet and got more of this precious balm in Tibet, and actually offered a big tub of that to the office. So it is now in our office here. And have instructed the office that anybody in the office can just use this balm, and they can also put it onto various things to be blessed. And that is because it doesn't make a difference who puts the balm on the object to bless a certain object, because blessing is still the same, doesn't make a difference. And also actually, when giving the refuge vow, this is the balm that I'm using to place onto the crown of the one taking refuge. So this is one thing I will not go without of all the blessings. It is the most important of all my blessings. So there are many stories about the special qualities and powers of this blessing balm, like it has protected me from weapons and illness and so forth. For example, it is said that once you are touched by this blessing balm, you will not contract any diseases, and also you will prevent diseases in general, sicknesses. And also, when it touches your body, when it's smeared onto your body, then even a wild animal that bites you cannot actually bite you. And so, for example, one time I was bitten by, many times bitten by dogs in the leg, but actually there was no wound at all. I could not really be bitten by those dogs because I had this balm on. So it is actually very, very famous and has really incredible blessings. And so there are many stories about this. Also, for example, it is said that no weapons can harm you when you have this balm smeared on you. And so for this reason, so that everybody can use this blessing balm, I gave one of those tubs to the office, and they can put it on all things. Anybody can do that. Yeah, so that is important to know, that not only I can do that, but anybody can use this balm and put it on there, and then the blessing is on the object. And so also actually, when I was in prison, when I arrived in prison, I was stripped of everything. They took everything from me, and the only thing I was able to hide secretly was a very small tub of this blessing balm. That was one thing I would not go without by any means. So this is the only thing I insisted on keeping at the time in prison, even though they took everything else. So ever since I have given this blessing balm, I've distributed it in Tibet and also in other Western countries and so on. And just recently I'm back at this prayer wheel and was able to replenish some of the balm. So this is really the most precious blessings of all blessings. And so it is important to understand its preciousness and truly cherish it and keep it, hold it dear. And so the blessing that we have now is still the same batch from the very beginning. So it is an uninterrupted continuum of blessings.
네 로주 체발지 지기요래 문제도 되는 무슨 뭐데 보고 같이리 마법한데 그래서 같이가 마요래 같이가 마가르잖아요 요래 좀저래 당은 이 되는 마가르는 것을 독칠비스 방법 존재는 것을 라마 김바지 콜로모잔로 요래 콜로모잔 파스나 그 콜로 제거 총총 콜로 제거 요래 콜로 제거라 어떤 총총 주면 되잖아. 근데 제일 많게 되뇨. 근데 마음이 용네 쭉 가르치고 요새 지금 이제 가르치는 거지 네 되니 로마 지금 내 총송을 이제 거래 마들 발라버라 총송을 이제
콜로 총총지래
총송이
예 가르 콜로디 총총지래
콜로 총총이 뭐 총총 왔다 깨고라 그래 대 마게 먹이 이게 뇨요라 미시기 뇨요라 미시기 뇨는 마가 하는 사람 내 가래리지 주 가래 뇨요지 네 총송을 해야지 속 종구도 코 종구요리지 라마게 내 라마야 정 총송을 그 총송에서 따고 그래지 근데 라요리 라처럼 라처럼 라플라다 따고 미다쇼이지 라마
가바딱
라길 타바잡 타판다 라선 따고 미다쇼이지 라데 셔처럼 셔고지 라데 셔처럼 셔고지 고집이 민망보르가 그만 이 시대에서 요리지 얘는 다 고쳐 담아 셔요라 라그 길은 콜로다 고 라만 콜로게라 이제 라그 길다 딱 라라디 메타 총다 쉬요리 메타 텐섬 쉬소 그 라시 봐서 들이 마참
라마데라 마무데 슈니인데
리신이 말아 같이 그 말아 들어 같이 그 종으로 그거 그래서 들이 마참하고 럽잡 그 라만 콜로 쳐봐 줘서 야 대시 들이 제일 우리 되게 좀 깨다 치고 차요라 대단히 깨다 치고 송을 빼 이렇게 또 잠이 막 해야 되니 랭거래
가두래
로 좀 지주고 근데 땅중 송것도 공신당 요 말이 되디
알리딩을라래
공신당 레비 요 말이
근데 콜로 총총 달라 신랍도
같이 그래
콜로 총총 달라
리 콜로 사람 사만 되게 작아요 손으로 되게 작아요 근데 그것도 틱톡 사람 사만 되게 작고 중고막 사람 그래야 진짜로라 네가 일단 남는 특징이 야도 그래 네 남는 특징이 생기 봐도 야도 그 네가 그래 장정 통도 공신당 저거야 그래
아니 특징이 봐
특징이 봐 갑리
And so there's actually another story about this precious blessing balm. That was at a time before the Cultural Revolution, during the Second World War, actually. And at that time there was another war inside Tibet and China. That was between the Muslims and the locals there. And so at that time, in our area, in the town, there was an older lama who was going around begging for alms, and he was he was selling this little wheel, a little pendant that was blessed with this balm for protection, a protection pendant. And so those foreign soldiers, came, and somebody had this pendant, and they asked them, so what's that? What's that good for? And so the person who was wearing this blessed pendant said, that is to protect from the harm of weapons. And then they wanted to know who is selling that, and said this lama. So they went to this lama and they said, so this is supposed to this is supposed to protect from the harm of weapons, but we need proof of that. So they caught a goat, and they said, we're going to throw arrows, shoot at the goat, and if the goat dies, we put a balm on the goat, and if the goat dies, then you will die too, because it's supposed to protect, and it's supposed to be true, right? So many people actually a big crowd of people was there watching and really witnessing all that. And so before that instance, actually, the locals actually really trusted in that balm, but at that time they were really apprehensive about what's actually going to happen now. So they caught that goat and put this blessing pendant on that goat. And then the soldiers were firing on the goat 3 times, but the goat didn't die. It stayed just as it is. And so those foreign soldiers were amazed, and then they took all those blessed pendants away from the Lama and they took it with them. And so it just became very famous and popular, in Tibet. And so ever since it increased and it became more and more popular.
The Sangha, then Java Chimboyore, Kolo Kareri, Kolon Dili, Lan Kolon Dita, then Kolo Dita Chibora, Kolo Pin, Hako Pinuzi, Hako Gonguyore, then Hako Gomaton with Alan Corda Kolo Chichi, Jonjon Gobaka and Kolomon, Kolo Pin Chipuri. Kolo Chung Chung, you know, Roda Tamabola, Chatuni Chatabjali, Chechogo Mari, Tema Chebare, the Kolo, Chipers and Habitat, Hako Chipus and Habla. The little at the time of Kolo Chung Chung, the Zona, then Kolo Chimbolo, the Kortogo and Kolo Chung Chung, Kortoma, that are Lagum, told in Hako Gongo, Gerum Tamjaram, Yil Chana, Yil Tank Chana. Treating on my but dinner to Kayore. Things go to Hancourt to Gongore. Don't take somebody. Then you see somebody come to the tongue. Then you see someone thinking somebody to the home. They go home to go out of the home. They didn't have to happen to Tong. Kate Tonga did the same sort of dog. Three days I have a data tap. There's a one top on the back. I don't go your dinner. Cheon wrapped up one night chocolate, so Chunatili Malariba, Yagra Chona Conjusora, Sarah Chapney, Malariba Yagra, the Chong du Masapara, Besties Avatini, then the town of Soju on the Chichon Correction, to Tada, say Tomogo to Tada, Teta, Yonguyore, Margaret Nupata, Jerum the top, De La Sobagre, get some Tomogo Trapaso. Nakaram Pravada. Then treasure theatre dropped about it, Tomogo Trabat. Then Nampas Haji by the church Tomoma, but Chogo Trabat. Tomogo Tamji, the Pena. She told Papa Tavaret. Chogo is Haji come of you. Then Namas Haji, Saji Command Bakayore. There is in Chogo good. Tomongo Chepata Papa, they carry the top of dinner. There is some Hagar Lamnatini, Togo Loret. There is some Hagar Lamdi, Kashiki, oh, then Namba married in Lamni or Sari, Saha, Namba married in Laku, sorry, Kachito, Namba Ray, Lamno. They Louis Sanjeke, Lamnaba Sumson, Le Tambo, Sotar. Sotar meaning Yongina, Sansem. That's not just beauty. Sansem means, three Sahara Tanjong. There's some Bacarina. Sancho same something in the Chiboyamba, the Dapoja Mashiba, Dapoja Shiba, the Chago, Machiba, Jiva tapped, Sotar, Gini, Manyampa tapped, Sansem, Manyampa tap carry. Something did the Jew zone, then is Sentina. Parts of a Togo, Leka Karichena, choosing the Sawa Karichena, passing the Rover Tap to Sansom Gram. Then when Sancho said, Daddy, Mewag, Yipi Loshok Chibocina, then is simply some just Saji Joy over Hako, simply number Saji, then Malari Bakatri, oh, Chuchi, Mantong, Chini, Tongs, Corte Chutam, Debar Madova Tongs. Then Tati, they were matter, but they was so sorry. Namshi is dogs. Namshi, Nadi is Daji, number Shiba, the negative dog. Namshi, oh, Zijapatam, the Tombani rate. Zonki Lang same Sotara, that Namshi did she reject. She called the Kesha Meba, that Jessic, that the Hakone, that's a Tonam Kata Hakone. Oh, Namshi Mountain, Yishi, Tony, 3 mountains, Haji, Tong. Circuit Namshi, the Yishi and Tong, got the same of just Haji and Tong to Kuyore. The way that Tasana, Tananga Labad, and Sotobaka, Tona, Tanan Church and Royore. Oh, when in Saha Bagatina, the things of Karawi, she's actually Sanjay Sawache. That they get chase on the go bunda Tatala, so thought or said you hako yore. Then was to a hako yore. There is some here the taparis, Madaba Soso Zorita. the Tangmaris, and the top part, and the Zambord, and the game baris. They listen, Lama gave it in the Datam Java, oh, Kashi Tung Tonko, Kashi Yung Di Tonko. The Yuma Tomato, the Katang Pejawari, Roar Dog Sampin, some Jake, Churchill, Lag the Stern Tonkoris. Meta to row Charter Tonkoris. The Rack not Charter Tonkoris. Yavak torture Tonkoris. Torture data with the Jenny, don't told you're the church for Mother Bishila. Oh, that's so Tanang Jaya Kachedo. Ye parable wants him on a matter. So the Tanang Jaya Kachedo, so Tanang shall decent the tar or Tanang the part hard already. They have got it, the Jenny Madaba Madok, they're Madaba nowadays, that's so rangus all those. Madaba nowadays, the Tama Madaba Tongue. That is our only. This is Sanga Tanang, but Sanga, the Jenny Tanang was so correct.
So actually this blessing wheel also is really related to the secret mantra, the Vajrayana actually, because in the Vajrayana we are visualizing the mantra garland, which is like such a wheel, like a prayer wheel, for example, like a handheld prayer wheel, and so if one cannot always visualize the mantra garland, sometimes also it is just as beneficial to hold, to spin a small handheld prayer wheel. It has the same benefit. The prayer wheel has the same benefit as the visualization of the mantra garland. And so our particular prayer wheel, our very special prayer wheel, that is the one that is actually for many generations and hundreds of years is spinning 24 hours non-stop. And also that is the same benefit as holding a handheld prayer wheel. It is good to have a small prayer wheel. If it is too large, you cannot spin it all the time. So it's better to have a small, convenient prayer wheel. And so also when we practice the deity, when we visualize the deity, we have to visualize the mantra garland of the deity as a main part of the creation stage. So first, when we visualize the deity, the creation stage, the deity appears at once. It appears as the deity, and even just vaguely, the deity appears to us, and we give rise to the deity once. And so that is when we appear as a Maya being, but for the most part we remain undistracted from the visualization of the mantra garland. So the mantra chain is the focus of our attention. So in the beginning we visualize the deity and then we focus on the mantra garland. So first we arise as a Maya being, the deity, and then it becomes smaller into the wisdom being. And then it's even smaller into the Samaya, the Samadhi being. When it gathers, the entire mantra garland gathers into the Hung, representing this Samadhi being. And so then it becomes smaller and smaller. The visualization gathers. And that actually is a very skillful means of Vajrayana practice, because the smaller, the more subtle the visualization becomes, the more clear the mind will be. And so how we visualize is, as you mentioned before, sometimes you can visualize it very large, like Mount Meru, and sometimes very small. For example, in a story of Milarepa, one time Milarepa made himself, transformed his body very small and entered a yak's horn. And Rejungpa, when he was starting to hail, and Rejungpa then was not even able to see him any longer. So we can visualize in different sizes, larger or smaller. And the benefit of practicing the visualization of the mantra garland of the deity is that first it leads to common signs or common siddhis, the various powers that arise from mantra. For example, flying in the sky or accomplishing any of the four enlightened activities. These are all common siddhis. But what distinguishes the Buddhist practice is actually the supreme sitting. The common cities are just like the skin of a fruit, but the supreme sitting is the actual fruit of attaining enlightenment. And so this is what we want to attain. It is the supreme city. That is the special quality, the special purpose of our practice. And in order to attain this, the Vajrayana path offers many skillful means. And so regarding that path, there's actually some people who say that the Vajrayana path is not even a Buddhist path. And some people would say that. But then also that is mistaken. It also comes, of course, from the Buddha. But we need to also see that the Buddha taught various levels of the path, the 3 levels of the path. So first, for beginning practitioners, the Buddha taught the pratimoksha path, or individual liberation. So here we first cultivate renunciation. And once we have cultivated renunciation, we progress to the bodhisattva path. And when then in that path bodhicitta arises, then finally we only enter the Vajrayana path. So first we understand the preciousness of bodhicitta, of loving kindness and compassion. And we learn to cherish it, to uphold it, because we did not do that before. We cultivate bodhicitta where it has not yet arisen. So that is the method of first the pratimoksha path. Then secondly, we do not let the bodhicitta that has arisen decline. That is the bodhisattva path. So here we continue to sustain, to always hold love and compassion. And that is reflected in all our activities, whether worldly or dharma practice. If we always hold compassion, then all our activities become the 6 paramitas. And then eventually, through this bodhicitta, self-grasping diminishes, and when strong altruism arises, we begin to see that all sentient beings possess the cause of enlightenment, Buddha nature. As the Buddha said, within all sentient beings is the Buddha. Or Milarepa had said, I do not see various objects, the objectivity, but I see the essence, the nature of phenomena of these objects. And so that means to see that all phenomena in samsara lack inherent existence. All phenomena in samsara and nirvana lack inherent existence. So this is what he had seen. So who is the one that perceives things as truly existing? It is our ordinary consciousness, our discriminating consciousness, because it discriminates between self and others. So self and others appear. But when you look at that which is created by the mind, it all is actually empty. And then when you look at the mind who created it all itself, then that consciousness is seen as primordial wisdom. Because it is unborn and unceasing. Then you realize the nature of this union of clarity and emptiness. So Milarepa therefore had said, I do not see discriminating consciousness, I only see primordial wisdom. And he said, therefore I do not see any sentient being, I only see Buddhas. Because whoever sees primordial wisdom does not see any sentient being any longer, only sees Buddhas. So the deeper your understanding of the Vajrayana view becomes, the more your pure perception will increase. And Jigten Sumgyen also had said, the one engaging in the field of knowable things is the Buddha. And so, which is the consciousness. So when we understand that, slowly, as our view of this deepens, our perception becomes more and more pure. So now we have an impure perspective. We see things impurely, but actually this is not how things actually are. We actually just create them. We fabricate this impurity. we label things as this is bad, or this is dirty, and this is pure, and so on. We label things like that, and by doing so, we fabricate impurity. For example, there's even some people who would look at the faults of His Holiness Dalai Lama, and others would see his qualities. So we have mentioned before, yesterday, how it is with people who only see the faults in others. It is their own perception, the perception of their own impure mind. We mentioned yesterday this example with this one cup of water and how different beings perceive it. They've said, for example, the gods perceive it as nectar, and the animals and humans as water, and the hungry spirits as pus and blood, and the hell beings as molten iron. And it's still the same object. It is just perceived in different ways. So that also shows that the object itself lacks inherent existence. And understanding that increases your pure perception. Then you really see that it actually is pure by nature, not impure the way I perceive it. And as pure perception arises, whenever a pure state of mind arises, the mind becomes more and more purified, and all impurity becomes cleared away. So we need to see that all our impure perceptions, our impure ways of seeing things, is not how things really are. We fabricate this impurity. There is actually no impurity. Because if it would be really impure, then it would be inherently impure, and everyone would always see it that way. But things are not inherently that way. So that is what we learn when we practice the Vajrayana. So the Vajrayana is a path of developing a pure perception. And so as we progress along that path, finally, what we really need to accomplish is such a pure perception.
Tata Jerem Cordina, Kashi, oh, Jerem the best, Sujat. There is some way, let a book of Granite of the Yuri. Yena, Jerem the Pinity, Hakogore. Jerem the Pinu Congress, Jerem the Nava Yason Yothang, Tambo, Jebaka, Jesse Jomati, Mala, Narchi, Wonchi. Zuchi, Joshaki, Jero, Jagon Semi, Jay, Dukin Samje. Take Jero number Yelatin, Jero by Yates or Sonre. Turchiva Rimacamite, Pengayore, Panchava High San, take young Pengayore, Penna. Number Chiba Chodra was the Yuna. Then Luda Pambada was a lady. Pambada, number Chiba, the Pamba, Torona, Chodit, Sartamdo, Yiwanki. New mobile, later new mobile one the Sato Temdo already. The Jerem the Pampa Sama chicken and Papa Chick Torgo, Papa Chick and Jiboja, not so one any Sata flies and Anglo, Pardon is local chocolate of Bodhichitta, Jerem the young, taping already. Nibala Jerem the Magomna, that a change is some Jajang good in Barnity, Pami, the call some Tangore, they pay Jitu Mount and doing so. This son of the Chatham, Tanga said the church was all over it. Church was all over it. These Tabla, not on Jerem large, they large good in Charlotte, set up to the family. The Sarva, Tawla, the Sarva, Cemetery, the Hash. Three was the same as Donald, the Tapadina. Takuji Charo Aldramila de Mamma the Carredi, or say Kuji Charo the Nang to you, Yuntina. Three say Jin Chayungore, but Papa and the Sunguyore. Nang to you, Yuntin Tamji, say Kuji Chayungore, Pena, Sadab, Jimbagaramji, Shabdab, Chachungaramji, don't relate Sadab Jimbagaramji, Jimbangor, Shabdab. Such a watch of Cheka, Targing in the Mambo, that's a lab to my base on Makara, was Hadabody, Jimakaram Girid, Shabdo, but the Chungaram Girid, passing dropped on the top Jalas of Watamji, Sanji Yongdin Samji, Gudin Chalu and Derungi, or Tisi Terit, Jerum Kate on Pat Hard or Benum to Toro, Chok 어쩌고 다대 속지 못하고라 대회 콘서트 그 생겨야 돼 우리 뒤에는 같이 장나더니 진짜 바짝만 쏘러오래 딱 빠진 타족등이 또 언니 또 어디 저름으로 들어오지 진짜 생기 짱짱 이제 속거더니 마다바 탐제 딱 빠르죠 딱 빠 돈이라 로트거리 깨는 거 한참 팽이요리 대 용기 대답이 요래
And so, regarding the creation stage, some people for whom it is a bit complicated to visualize the creation stage, especially for beginning practitioners. And so first it is important to understand the great benefits, the purpose of practicing the creation stage. So first there are 4 different types of creation stage, and the creation stage in general purifies the existence of birth. So there's 4 different types of birth. There's a birth through a womb, a birth through an egg, a birth through heat and moisture, and a miraculous or instantaneous birth. And corresponding to the 4 types of birth, there are 4 types of creation stage that purify these types of birth. And so that will help us when it comes to taking birth. And also at the time of death, the visualization, the clear vision of the deity will be very beneficial. Because when we die, the consciousness, you can say the consciousness is like water. And our body is like the vase that holds the water. When we die, the vase breaks. We lose our body. And so then the water has no vessel, so it falls to the ground. And without any choice, being overpowered by afflictions and karmas, it is drawn to the ground and dissolves with the dirt on the ground. That's how it is ordinarily. But if one has practiced the creation stage, then once the vase of the body breaks, another vase appears, which is the creation stage. And as the consciousness water falls down, the other vase of creation stage catches it. And so it enters this other vase, which is the body of the deity. So that is the benefit of sustaining the clear visualization of the deity at the time of death. And then in the bardo, one may attain enlightenment into the Sambhogakaya or Nirmanakaya. So such are the benefits of the creation stage. And then also secondly, now if we default of not practicing the creation stage, if we do not practice the creation stage, ordinary people are only concerned about the purpose of this life. A day and night, uninterruptedly, they only think about this life. They think about all those things that happened in the past, and they make plans for the future. And the more we think about it, the more we defile our mind. So instead of doing that, we visualize the form of the deity, its color and its implements and so on, in all its clarity, and have the deity clearly appear in the mind as we have it in our picture or image. So that is the first step of the creation stage. We clearly visualize. Secondly, we recollect the purity of the deity, and that is also important because the deity appears in many different ways with different implements and elements and so on. And it is good to understand them. It is good to understand that these are all outer symbols that represent an inner enlightened quality of the deity. This is, for example, how it is also explained in the Vajrakilaya practice. For example, we cannot mention all of them now, but in that context, for example, the bracelet, for example, of the 6 parameters represents generosity. And then the anklet around the ankles, that represents the parameter of moral ethics, moral conduct. And so each of these elements represents the 6 parameters or the 10 powers of a Buddha. All the qualities of a Buddha are reflected in these outer symbols. So the more we think about and we visualize these pure symbols of the deity, the more our mind becomes purified. So it is just like practicing the creation stage. It's just like washing dirty clothes. When the clothes are really dirty, you need a lot of soap to clean it. And the more you clean it, the cleaner it gets. And so in the same way, the more you train in the creation stage, visualization, the more purified your mind becomes. And then in the end, when the mind becomes clear and purified, comes to its natural state, we practice the completion stage, where we rest in this natural state. So this is the line of order when we practice creation stage. First, we purify our impure perception into a pure perception, and then we purify that pure perception into emptiness. So these are the great benefits of the creation stage.
Deve tada kashi jirim munisar matebni yori. De matebni tasar matebni pega mari de mari. Ya de na tu later yichi dewa chimo shargore. Dewa chimo sharna kangri de. Later rang semni jeya me ba. Pero rang de dewa chimo mechi ur doju na. De kai yadi ur semni chingri. Be se da de tum teni yang pengi yori. Be kangri de na. De uni pengi dog nganyam yori. 가서 딱벌 짓지는 뭐 싸우 곰 덮어요 말지 얘는 강이 가지고 채나 남자 로마지 소고요 그래 강이 짓진 거 짓지 로마지는 문이 저 띵이 셰초초 소탁게 잡여는 문이 주도 가지 지요래 제 제리지 주요 말이라 소소가 문이 셰초초가 잡민 곰이 잡으로 잡마 잡아 고는 고못 잡아 랑ጭ 버렸더니 대다고 강했지 못한 게 소소한 게 저들이 가리 계속 남산 강에 가는 데나 남산 로마쟁이도 특히 로마 될수 있잖아 이 가리 계속돼 하고만은 소리 타서 삐졌다 그래 들사리 이지요나 양계는 마사나나 네발 랩게 해야지 들이 뒤지니 때 지인에 라 요지 지 들이 가라사지 사지 지인은 사지 주발이 치발이 요 말이 대리 진짜매 봐. 너도 용기 가려롱도 사지는더니 초조래. 너는 초조시 와대. 소소다 사지 사람 좋고요래. 들이대리.
So there's some practitioners for whom it is difficult to visualize the deity, the creation stage, and then they think that there's nothing I can do to practice then. But that is also not true. Even if you cannot visualize so clearly, it is necessary to cultivate trust and love for the deity. So if you trust the deity and if your love for the deity is great, then that is sufficient, even if your visualization is unclear. And having love for the deity means that the deity never leaves your mind. You never forget about the deity. Just like you have a loving friend, somebody you love very much, you always think about them. You never forget about them. So just like that, if you think of the deity in this way, it is really very beneficial. And that is actually my own experience. Whenever I practice Tara, but of course I'm not always visualizing Tara very clearly at all times. However, there were times when I encountered great difficulty, great dangers in my life, and then immediately I think of Tara and nothing else. I do not think about the difficulty, the danger. I only think of Tara. And in that way, Tara actually protected my life 8 times. So there were 8 instances where I really was on the verge of dying. And I'm telling you that because I know you trust me. And really at that time, when these life-threatening circumstances appeared, there was really no time to act in any other way. There was really no other rescue, no one to help. I was on my own, on the verge of dying 8 times in my life. And so how did Tara protect me then? So when that circumstance happened, immediately I thought of Tara and nothing else. And actually, I don't even know what actually happened in those terrible accidents and so on. It didn't occur to me at all. I just thought of Tara. So that is the power that comes to you when you really trust fully the deity. And that power arises even if you do not clearly visualize, if you're unable to clearly visualize. So therefore, it is more important to always keep in mind the qualities of the deity. And so also later then when you eat, think of the deity, because if you eat the food while sustaining the clear vision of the deity, eating actually becomes an offering to the deity, because then you're eating without attachment. And then you can apply that to any of the other sense pleasures. If you practice in this way, you're actually accumulating merit. The merit you accumulate is that the blessings of the deity will enter your mind.